Every night, you go insane. You enter a world where the laws of physics do not apply, where the dead are alive, where you can fly but cannot run, where buildings rearrange themselves as you walk through them, where time collapses and expands without warning, and where the most bizarre, the most terrifying, and the most profoundly beautiful experiences unfold with a vividness and an emotional intensity that often exceeds anything you experience while awake. You inhabit this world for approximately 2 hours every night. You have spent approximately 6 years of your life in it. And when you wake, the world dissolves, leaving behind fragments, traces, and the lingering sense that something important happened that you cannot quite remember. Dreams are the most universal, the most frequent, and the most poorly understood altered state of consciousness that human beings experience. Every person dreams, every mammal dreams, every bird dreams. And the dreams are not random noise, not the meaningless byproduct of a brain running maintenance routines during sleep. The dreams are structured, they are narratively coherent. They contain characters, settings, plots, and emotional arcs that unfold with a logic that is different from waking logic, but that is, in its own domain, remarkably consistent. The dreams are doing something. The question is what? The neuroscience of dreaming has made extraordinary progress in the past 3 decades, but the progress has deepened the mystery rather than resolving it. We now know more about when dreams occur, which brain regions are active during dreams, and what neurochemical conditions produce the dream state. But we know almost nothing about why dreams have the specific content they have, why you dream about a specific person on a specific night, why the dream contains specific details that you did not consciously think about during the day, and why the dream sometimes contains information that you did not have access to through any normal channel. The when is well established. Dreams occur primarily during rapid eye movement, sleep, REM sleep, the phase of sleep characterized by fast, irregular eye movements beneath closed lids, by the near-complete paralysis of the voluntary muscles, by brain activity patterns that closely resemble waking consciousness, and by the vivid, bizarre, emotionally intense experiences that subjects report when awakened from REM. REM sleep occurs in cycles of approximately 90 minutes, with each cycle producing a longer REM period. The first REM period of the night lasts approximately 10 minutes. The last may last 45 minutes or more, and the total REM time per night is approximately 90 to 120 minutes, 2 hours of dreaming per night, every night, for the duration of your life. The brain activity during REM is extraordinary. The visual cortex is active as during waking visual perception, producing the vivid visual imagery that characterizes most dreams. The motor cortex is active, generating the motor commands that would produce the movements the dreamer experiences, but that are blocked by the atonia, the muscle paralysis that REM sleep imposes to prevent the dreamer from acting out the dream. The limbic system is hyperactive. The amygdala, the emotional processing center, is more active during REM than during any waking state, producing the intense emotions, fear, joy, desire, grief, awe that dreams carry. And the prefrontal cortex is hypoactive, the region responsible for logical reasoning, critical judgment, and the sense of self is suppressed during REM, which is why dreams feel real while they are happening, why the dreamer does not question the bizarre events unfolding around them, and why the critical faculty that would immediately flag a flying elephant or a talking river as impossible in waking life is absent during the dream. The pattern of brain activity during REM poses a paradox that the neuroscience has not resolved. The sensory input regions of the brain are active, but the senses are shut off. The motor output regions are active, but the muscles are paralyzed. The emotional processing regions are hyperactive, but there is no external emotional stimulus. And the visual cortex is generating detailed, vivid, cinematically rich visual experiences, but the eyes are closed and no light is entering the retina. The dreaming brain is behaving as though it is perceiving an external world, but the external world has been disconnected. The brain is generating the complete experience of a reality that does not exist in the physical environment. It is generating the experience from an internal source. What is the internal source? The standard neuroscientific answer is that the source is memory, that the brain recombines stored memories, reconfigures familiar elements, and generates the dream experience from the raw material of past experience. This answer is partially correct. Dreams do contain elements of past experience, familiar faces, familiar places, familiar situations recombined into new configurations. But the answer is incomplete, because dreams also contain elements that are not from past experience, elements that the dreamer has never encountered, details that the dreamer could not have stored in memory, and information that the dreamer could not have acquired through any normal channel. The neurochemistry of REM is equally distinctive. The neuromodulators that dominate waking consciousness, norepinephrine, serotonin, and histamine, are suppressed during REM. The neuromodulator that dominates REM is acetylcholine, which floods the brain at levels that exceed waking levels and that produces the characteristic features of the dream state: the vivid sensory imagery, the emotional intensity, the associative, non-linear, symbolically rich cognitive processing that dreams display. The suppression of norepinephrine is particularly significant. Norepinephrine is the neurochemical of focused attention, logical sequencing, and reality testing. Its suppression during REM removes the cognitive framework that the waking mind uses to distinguish real events from imagined ones, which is why the dream feels real while it is happening, and why the dreamer cannot tell from within the dream that the experience is not waking reality. The suppression of the reality testing neurotransmitters during REM has a specific implication that the neuroscience has not fully explored. The dreaming brain is in a state of reduced decoherence. Decoherence, the process by which the quantum superpositions of the brain's microtubules are collapsed by the thermal interactions with the environment, is mediated, in part, by the noradrenergic and serotonergic systems that are suppressed during REM. The suppression of these systems during REM reduces the decoherence rate, allowing the microtubules' quantum superpositions to persist for longer periods and to achieve a degree of coherence that the waking brain, with its full complement of decoherence-inducing neurotransmitters, cannot sustain. If the Auchor model is correct, if consciousness is produced by quantum processes in the microtubules, then the dreaming brain's reduced decoherence means that the dreaming consciousness has access to deeper quantum information than the waking consciousness. The quantum computations in the microtubules can explore a wider range of quantum states, access more of the Planck scale information, and perceive more of the temporal and spatial information that the entanglement structure of the block universe encodes. The dreaming brain is, in the Auchor framework, a quantum receiver with a wider bandwidth, a receiver that can detect signals that the waking brain's higher decoherence rate filters out. This has a specific, testable prediction. The anomalous information in dreams, the information that the dreamer could not have obtained through normal channels, should be more abundant during the deepest REM periods, when the norepinephrine suppression is most complete and the decoherence rate is at its lowest. The prediction has not been tested. But the framework provides a specific, physically precise mechanism for the anomalous information that the dream literature documents, a mechanism that the next stage of this investigation will develop in detail. The neuroscientist J. Allan Hobson, who developed the activation synthesis hypothesis in 1977, proposed that dreams are the brain's attempt to make sense of random neural activity. During REM, the brainstem sends random electrical signals to the cortex. The cortex, receiving these signals, attempts to synthesize them into a coherent narrative, stitching together the random activations into a story that makes the best sense of the random input. The dream is the story, the randomness is the source, and the bizarre quality of dreams is a consequence of the randomness of the input, the cortex doing its best to make a coherent narrative out of incoherent signals. Hobson's hypothesis was influential. It dominated the neuroscience of dreaming for 2 decades, and it has been progressively abandoned not because it was wrong about the brainstem activation, but because it was wrong about the randomness. The evidence accumulated over the past 20 years demonstrates, with increasing clarity, that dreams are not random. They are structured, systematic, and informationally meaningful in ways that the random activation hypothesis cannot account for. The neuroscientist Mark Solms, at the University of Cape Town, delivered the most significant challenge to Hobson's random activation hypothesis. Solms demonstrated, through the study of patients with specific brain lesions, that the brainstem activation that Hobson identified as the trigger for dreaming is neither necessary nor sufficient for dreams to occur. Patients with brainstem damage that eliminates the REM-generating circuits can still dream, and patients with damage to the dopaminergic circuits of the ventral tegmental area, the brain's motivational and reward system, lose the ability to dream entirely, even though their REM sleep is intact. The dreaming, Solms showed, is generated not by the brainstem's random activation, but by the dopaminergic motivational system, the system that drives seeking, wanting, desiring, and exploring. Dreams are not the brain's attempt to make sense of random noise. They are the brain's motivational system generating simulated experiences that are driven by the organism's deepest concerns, desires, and unresolved needs. Solms's finding transforms the question of dream content from "why is it random?" to "why is it so specifically organized around the dreamer's deepest concerns?" The dreams are not noise, they are signal, a specific, motivationally driven, emotionally charged signal that the brain's deepest processing systems generate during the period when the waking mind's filtering is removed. Solms's discovery connects dreaming to desire to the deepest motivational structures of the brain, the structures that drive the organism toward what it wants, needs, and lacks. The dream is not random noise generated by the brainstem. It is a motivated exploration generated by the dopaminergic system, an exploration of possibilities, scenarios, and configurations that the organism's deepest motivational structures are driving toward. The question is, what is the dream exploring? The standard answer is that the dream is exploring stored memories and recombining familiar elements. But the anomalous dream data suggests that the dream may be exploring something more, something beyond the stored memories, beyond the familiar elements, beyond the brain's internal resources. The neuroscientist Antti Revonsuo at the University of Turku has proposed the threat simulation theory of dreaming. The hypothesis that dreams evolved as a biological mechanism for simulating threatening situations, allowing the organism to practice threat avoidance behaviors in a safe, simulated environment. Revonsuo's theory explains why negative emotions, especially fear, are the most common emotions in dreams, and why dreams so frequently involve threatening scenarios. But the theory does not explain the anomalous information, the information from beyond the brain's stored experience that the dream literature documents. The threat simulations should draw on stored memories of past threats. They should not draw on information about future events, distant locations, or other people's mental states. The psychologist G. William Domhoff at the University of California, Santa Cruz, has assembled the largest database of dream content ever collected, over 20,000 dream reports from subjects of all ages, cultures, and psychological profiles. Domhoff's analysis reveals that dream content is not random. It is continuous with waking concerns reflecting the dreamer's current preoccupations, relationships, emotional conflicts, and life circumstances with a specificity and a consistency that the random activation hypothesis does not predict. The people who appear in your dreams are not random. They are the people you interact with most frequently, think about most intensely, and feel most strongly about. The settings of your dreams are not random. They are the places you visit most often, the environments you are most familiar with, and the locations that carry the strongest emotional associations. And the emotional content of your dreams is not random. It reflects your current emotional state with a fidelity that multiple studies have confirmed. Domhoff's data also reveals a feature of dream content that the continuity hypothesis predicts, but that has a deeper significance than Domhoff recognized. The emotional content of dreams is more intense than the emotional content of waking life. The amygdala's hyperactivity during REM produces emotional experiences that are, on average, more vivid, more powerful, and more overwhelming than any emotional experience the dreamer has during the day. The dreamer experiences terror that exceeds any waking fear, grief that exceeds any waking loss, joy that exceeds any waking pleasure, and awe that exceeds any waking wonder. The dreams are emotionally amplified. The same concerns that occupy the waking mind are experienced in the dream at an emotional intensity that the waking mind's regulatory mechanisms would normally prevent. The amplification suggests that the dreaming brain is processing emotional information at a deeper level than the waking brain, that the removal of the prefrontal cortex's regulatory influence allows the emotional processing to reach a depth and an intensity that the waking mind's self-regulation constrains. The dream is not merely reflecting waking concerns. It is processing them at a level of emotional depth that the waking mind cannot reach, because the waking mind's filtering prevents the emotional processing from exceeding the threshold that biological survival requires. But Domhoff's continuity hypothesis, the hypothesis that dreams are continuous with waking life, does not explain everything. It does not explain the bizarre elements, the dead who appear alive, the buildings that rearrange themselves, the ability to fly, the time distortions, the impossible juxtapositions that give dreams their distinctive, surreal quality. And it does not explain the most puzzling feature of dreams, the information that the dreamer could not have obtained through any normal channel. The phenomenon of anomalous dream information has been documented by researchers for over a century. The Society for Psychical Research, founded in 1882, collected thousands of reports of dreams that contained specific, verifiable information about events that had not yet occurred, about people the dreamer had never met, and about places the dreamer had never visited. The reports were anecdotal, subject to the biases of self-report, selective memory, and post hoc rationalization. But the volume of the reports, their consistency across cultures, and the specificity of the information they contained prompted several researchers to investigate the phenomenon systematically. The psychologist Stanley Krippner at the Maimonides Medical Center in Brooklyn conducted the most rigorous experimental investigation of anomalous dream information in the 1960s and 1970s. Krippner's protocol was designed to test whether a sleeping subject could dream about a target image that was being viewed in a separate room by a sender. The sender concentrated on a randomly selected art print, while the subject slept in a soundproofed, electromagnetically shielded room. The subject was awakened during REM periods and asked to describe their dreams. The dream descriptions were then compared to the target images by independent judges who were blind to the target selection. The results were statistically significant. Across multiple studies, the judges identified the correct target image from the dream descriptions at rates that exceeded chance by a margin that conventional statistics identifies as significant. The dreams did not reproduce the target images in photographic detail, but they contained thematic elements, emotional tones, and specific visual features that match the targets with a consistency that the chance hypothesis could not account for. A subject dreaming while the sender viewed a print of a boxing match dreamed of violent physical conflict. A subject dreaming while the sender viewed a print of a tropical scene dreamed of lush vegetation and warm water. The correspondences were not exact, but they were specific enough and consistent enough to produce statistical significance across the study as a whole. The effect size of the Maimonides studies, calculated across all sessions, was moderate but consistent, comparable to the effect sizes found in many accepted areas of psychology and medicine. The psychologist Irvin Child at Yale University reanalyzed the Maimonides data using his own statistical methods and confirmed the significance of the results, publishing his analysis in the American Psychologist, one of the most prestigious journals in the field. Child's conclusion was blunt. The results are not attributable to methodological artifacts, and the hypothesis that the dreams reflect information from the target images is supported by the data. The dream telepathy paradigm has been replicated with varying degrees of success by researchers at multiple institutions, including the University of Edinburgh, the University of Northampton, and the Rhine Research Centre. The replications have not been uniformly successful. Some studies find significant results and others do not, but the meta-analysis of all dream telepathy studies, conducted by the statistician Simon Sherwood and the parapsychologist Chris Rowe, found an overall effect size that was statistically significant and that was consistent across different experimenters, different subject populations, and different target materials. Krippner's results have been debated for decades. The skeptic Ray Hyman argued that the statistical methods were flawed. The parapsychologist Charles Honiton countered that independent replications confirmed the effect. The debate has not been resolved, but the Maimonides studies remain the most carefully controlled experimental investigation of anomalous dream information ever conducted, and their results, while not conclusive, are consistent with the hypothesis that dreams can access information that the sleeping brain's normal sensory channels do not provide. The precognitive dream, the dream that contains specific information about future events, is the most dramatic and the most controversial form of anomalous dream information. The literature contains thousands of reports of dreams that preceded, in specific detail, events that occurred days, weeks, or months later. The British aeronautical engineer J.W. Dunn published a systematic study of precognitive dreams in 1927, an experiment with time, in which he documented his own dreams and found that approximately 10% contained specific details that matched future events with a precision that the coincidence hypothesis strained to explain. The phenomenon of precognitive dreams is not limited to anecdotal reports. The psychologist Jessica Utz at the University of California, Davis, a professor of statistics who was commissioned by the CIA to evaluate the statistical evidence for anomalous information transfer, concluded that the statistical evidence for precognition, including precognitive dreams, meets the conventional criteria for significance, and that the statistical results of the studies examined are far beyond what is expected by chance. Utz's conclusion does not prove that precognitive dreams are real, but it establishes that the statistical evidence is strong enough to warrant serious investigation, and that the dismissal of the evidence on a priori grounds is not scientifically justified. The cognitive scientist Jonathan Schooler at the University of California, Santa Barbara, has proposed that the anomalous information in dreams may be related to the brain's predictive processing, the computational framework in which the brain is constantly generating predictions about future states of the world and comparing these predictions to incoming sensory data. During sleep, when the sensory input is cut off, the predictive processing continues, generating predictions about future states without the constraint of incoming data. Schooler speculates that these unconstrained predictions may occasionally, through mechanisms that are not yet understood, access genuine information about future events, producing the precognitive dreams that the literature documents. The neuroscience cannot easily accommodate anomalous dream information. If dreams are generated by the brain's internal activity by the activation of stored memories, the recombination of familiar elements, and the synthesis of random neural signals, then the dreams should contain only information that the brain already possesses. They should not contain information about events that have not yet occurred, about images being viewed in separate rooms, or about places and people that the dreamer has never encountered. The presence of anomalous information in dreams suggests that the dreaming brain has access to an information source that the waking brain does, not a source that extends beyond the brain's stored memories and beyond the brain's sensory channels. What is the source? The physicist David Deutsch, one of the founders of quantum computation and a proponent of the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, has proposed that dreams may be the subjective experience of quantum computation, the brain's quantum processes exploring multiple computational pathways simultaneously and producing the bizarre, multi-threaded, logically inconsistent but emotionally coherent experiences that dreams display. In Deutsch's framework, the dream's bizarre quality is not a defect. It is a feature, the experience of a brain that is computing in superposition, exploring multiple possibilities simultaneously, and generating a conscious experience that reflects the superposition rather than the single, collapsed, classical outcome that the waking brain produces. Deutsch's proposal connects to the many worlds interpretation. If every quantum computation produces a branch of the wave function, and if the dreaming brain is computing in superposition, then the dream is the experience of multiple branches simultaneously. The experience of a consciousness that is, during the dream, spread across multiple branches of the wave function, perceiving elements from each branch and combining them into the bizarre, impossible, multi-reality experience that the dream displays. The dead person who is alive in the dream may be alive in another branch. The building that rearranges itself may be reflecting the different spatial configurations of different branches. And the ability to fly may be reflecting a branch in which the physical laws are different from the laws of the branch in which the waking consciousness is embedded. The contemplative traditions provide a unanimous answer. The source is a deeper level of reality that the waking consciousness cannot normally access, but that the dreaming consciousness, freed from the constraints of the waking mind, can perceive. In Hinduism, the Mandukya Upanishad's analysis of the dream state, the taijasa, the luminous one, describes the dreaming consciousness as a consciousness that has turned inward, that is perceiving not the external world, but the subtle world, the layer of reality that is beneath the gross physical surface and that contains information about the past, the future, and the hidden connections between events. The dream is not a hallucination. It is a perception of the subtle layer of reality that the waking consciousness, focused on the gross physical surface, cannot access. The Yoga Vasishtha describes the dream state as a portal to the hidden layers of reality. In dream, the mind creates entire worlds with their own suns, their own moons, their own mountains and rivers and people. These worlds are not less real than the waking world. They are different configurations of the same consciousness, different projections of the same creative power that produces the waking world. The implication is radical. The dream world is not a hallucination produced by a sleeping brain. It is a genuine reality, a genuine configuration of consciousness, a genuine projection of the creative power that produces all realities. The dream world and the waking world are not different in kind. They are different in mode, different projections of the same underlying consciousness, different channels of the same creative source. The Chandogya Upanishad adds, "In the state of dream, the self becomes its own light. It creates its own spaces, its own vehicles, its own roads, its own joys and sorrows. It is the creator. There is no second thing. The dreaming self is not a passive receiver of random neural signals. It is a creator, a consciousness that generates entire worlds from its own creative power. And the worlds it generates may not be random hallucinations. They may be genuine realities, genuine configurations of the multidimensional consciousness that the waking state's filtering normally prevents from being perceived." In Buddhism, the practice of dream yoga, the systematic cultivation of lucid awareness within the dream state, is based on the understanding that the dream state provides access to dimensions of reality that the waking state does not. The dream yogi learns to maintain conscious awareness during dreams, to recognize the dream as a dream while dreaming, and to use the dream state as a platform for exploring the deeper structures of consciousness and reality. The Tibetan tradition teaches that the dream state is closer to the clear light, the luminous ground of consciousness, than the waking state, because the dream state's reduced filtering allows more of the hidden layers information to enter the conscious experience. The Tibetan Buddhist master Namkhai Norbu, one of the foremost teachers of dream yoga in the 20th century, described the dream state as having three layers: the ordinary dream, the recombination of waking memories and concerns; the clarity dream, the dream in which the dreamer perceives information from beyond the ordinary source's past lives, future events, distant locations; and the clear light dream, the dream in which the dreamer perceives the luminous ground of consciousness itself, the hidden layer from which all realities, waking and dreaming, are projected. The progression from ordinary to clarity to clear light is a progression through the hidden layers of reality from the surface, the ordinary dream's recombination of waking material, through the intermediate layers. The clarity dream's perception of temporal and spatial information from beyond the present moment to the deepest layer. The clear light dream's direct perception of the conscious ground. The dream yogi who masters the practice can navigate these layers deliberately, using the dream state as a vehicle for exploring the multidimensional structure of reality from within. The neuroscientist Stephen LaBerge at Stanford University has demonstrated that lucid dreaming, the state in which the dreamer is aware that they are dreaming while the dream continues, is a learnable skill that produces specific, measurable changes in brain activity. LaBerge's lucid dreamers show enhanced prefrontal activation during the lucid dream, the partial restoration of the reality testing faculty that is normally suppressed during REM. The lucid dreamer has the best of both worlds: the REM state's reduced decoherence and enhanced quantum sensitivity, combined with the waking state's prefrontal awareness and critical judgment. The lucid dreamer is, in the quantum framework, a conscious explorer of the reduced decoherence regime, a researcher who can navigate the deeper quantum information that the dreaming brain accesses while maintaining the waking awareness that can evaluate, remember, and report what is perceived. In Christianity, the tradition of prophetic dreams, dreams that contain divinely granted information about future events, extends from Genesis to Revelation. Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dream of 7 fat cows and 7 lean cows as a prediction of 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. Daniel interprets Nebuchadnezzar's dream of a great statue as a prediction of the rise and fall of empires. And Joseph, the father of Jesus, receives in a dream the angelic warning to flee to Egypt. The Christian tradition does not regard prophetic dreams as anomalous. It regards them as one of the normal channels through which the divine communicates with the human, a channel that is more open during sleep, when the waking mind's filtering is reduced and the consciousness is more receptive to information from beyond the ordinary sensory channels. The Islamic tradition describes the dream as one of the 46 parts of prophecy, a specific, divinely authorized channel through which information from beyond the ordinary sensory world can reach the human consciousness. The Prophet Muhammad stated, "The truest dreams are those of the righteous person, connecting the quality of the dream information to the spiritual quality of the dreamer. The connection is consistent with the filter theory. The spiritually purified consciousness has a more transparent filter, allowing more of the hidden layers information to enter the dream experience with less distortion." The Jewish tradition's concept of the dream as a 60th of prophecy, Talmud Berachot 57b, describes the dream as a diluted, fragmentary form of the prophetic perception, a perception that accesses the same informational source as prophecy, but that receives the information in a weaker, more distorted, less complete form. The prophet receives the information clearly. The ordinary dreamer receives it through a fog, fragmentary, symbolic, emotionally distorted, but containing genuine information from the same source that the prophet accesses directly. The question of where the anomalous dream information comes from, the question of the source, is the question that the next stage of this investigation will pursue. Because the quantum physics of the multiverse, the many worlds interpretation, and the theory of decoherence provide a specific, physically precise, experimentally grounded framework for understanding the source, the information is leaking. It is leaking from other branches of the wave function, from other configurations of the multiverse, from other versions of reality that coexist with ours in the quantum superposition, and that the decoherence barrier normally prevents us from perceiving. The dreams are the leak. The sleeping brain, with its reduced decoherence and its enhanced quantum sensitivity, is detecting the information that bleeds through the barrier between worlds. And the bizarre, the impossible, and the anomalous elements of dreams are not the brain's failures of coherent narrative. They are the fragments of other realities, the shards of parallel worlds, leaking through the quantum barrier and assembling themselves in the sleeping brain into the experiences that we call dreams. We have established that dreams are not random neural noise. They are structured, motivationally driven, emotionally amplified experiences that the brain's dopaminergic system generates during a state of reduced decoherence, a state in which the norepinephrine and serotonin systems that maintain waking reality testing are suppressed, in which the prefrontal cortex's critical filtering is removed, and in which the quantum coherence of the brain's microtubules may persist for longer periods than the waking state permits. And we have established that dreams sometimes contain anomalous information about events that have not yet occurred, about images being viewed in separate rooms, and about people and places that the dreamer has never encountered, information that the brain's stored memories and sensory channels cannot account for. Now we must examine the quantum mechanical framework that could explain the source of the anomalous information, because if the information is not coming from the brain's internal resources, it must be coming from somewhere else. And the physics of the multiverse, the many worlds interpretation, and the theory of decoherence provide a specific, physically precise, experimentally grounded framework for identifying the somewhere else. The information is leaking from other branches of the wave function, from other versions of reality that coexist with ours in the quantum superposition, and that the decoherence barrier normally prevents us from perceiving. The framework begins with the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. The many worlds interpretation, proposed by Hugh Everett in 1957 and developed by Bryce DeWitt, David Deutsch, and others, holds that the quantum wave function never collapses. Every quantum measurement, every quantum event, every quantum interaction causes the universe to branch, splitting into multiple coexisting branches, each containing a different outcome of the measurement, each equally real, and each containing conscious observers who experience their branch as the only reality. The branching is continuous. Every quantum event produces new branches. And the total wave function of the universe, the universal wave function, contains every branch, every outcome, every possible configuration of reality, superposed and evolving according to the Schrödinger equation. The number of branches is inconceivably large. Every quantum event in the universe, every photon absorption, every radioactive decay, every molecular collision, every neural firing produces new branches. The physicist Max Tegmark has estimated that the number of branches created in a single second exceeds 10 to the power of 10 to the power of 100, a number so vast that it has no meaningful comparison in the physical world. The branches multiply exponentially with every passing moment, and the total number of branches that have been created since the Big Bang is, for all practical purposes, infinite. In the many worlds interpretation, every possible version of every event exists in some branch. There is a branch in which the dinosaurs were not wiped out by an asteroid, a branch in which Rome never fell, a branch in which you turned left instead of right at that intersection 3 years ago, a branch in which the person you lost is still alive. Every possibility that the quantum mechanics permits is realized in some branch, and the total reality, the universal wave function that contains all branches, is incomprehensibly vaster, more complex, and more informationally rich than the single branch that your waking consciousness perceives as the only reality. The philosopher of physics David Wallace has argued that the many worlds interpretation is not merely one interpretation among many. It is the default interpretation, the interpretation that the mathematics of quantum mechanics naturally produces when taken at face value. The wave function evolves according to the Schrödinger equation. The Schrödinger equation does not contain a collapse, therefore the wave function does not collapse, therefore all branches exist. The many worlds interpretation is not an addition to quantum mechanics. It is quantum mechanics, the pure, unmodified, mathematically natural consequence of the theory's equations. The branches are separated by decoherence. When a quantum superposition interacts with its environment, when the quantum system exchanges energy, momentum, or information with the surrounding particles, the different branches of the superposition become entangled with different states of the environment. The entanglement with the environment produces decoherence, the suppression of the quantum interference between the branches that makes them, for all practical purposes, independent and non-interacting. The branches cannot communicate. They cannot exchange information. They cannot influence each other. The decoherence barrier between them is extraordinarily effective, so effective that no macroscopic observation has ever detected the interference between branches that the many worlds interpretation predicts. For all practical purposes, but not for all possible purposes. The phrase, "for all practical purposes," is the key. The physicist John Bell, who derived the famous Bell inequalities that prove the non-local character of quantum entanglement, was deeply suspicious of the phrase "for all practical purposes" in physics. Bell argued that what is true for all practical purposes may not be true in principle, and that the difference between practically zero and exactly zero can be the difference between a universe that is fundamentally one thing and a universe that is fundamentally another. The interference between branches is practically zero, but if it is not exactly zero, then the branches are not perfectly isolated. And if the branches are not perfectly isolated, then the possibility of interbranch communication, however faint, however fragmentary, however difficult to detect, is a genuine possibility that the physics does not exclude. The physicist Roger Penrose has argued that the decoherence that separates the branches is not merely a practical suppression of interference, but an objective, physical process, the objective reduction that his theory of quantum gravity describes. In Penrose's framework, the decoherence is not a gradient that asymptotically approaches zero. It is a threshold, a specific, gravitationally determined boundary below which the superposition is maintained and above which it collapses. The threshold provides a natural mechanism for partial interbranch communication. Superpositions that are below the threshold maintain coherence and preserve interbranch interference, while superpositions that are above the threshold collapse and destroy the interference. The dreaming brain, with its reduced environmental interaction and its enhanced quantum coherence, may maintain more of its superpositions below the threshold, preserving more interbranch interference and detecting more interbranch information than the waking brain, whose higher decoherence rate pushes more superpositions above the threshold. The decoherence between branches is not absolute. It is not a wall. It is a gradient, a continuous, distance-dependent suppression of the quantum interference that decreases the interbranch communication exponentially with the degree of environmental entanglement, but that never reduces it to exactly zero. The interference between branches is not zero. It is incredibly small, smaller than any currently measurable quantity, smaller than any foreseeable experimental sensitivity can detect, but it is not zero. The branches are not perfectly isolated. They are almost perfectly isolated, and the almost is the crack through which the information could leak. The physicist David Deutsch has analyzed the conditions under which interbranch information could, in principle, be detected. Deutsch's analysis shows that the detection requires a quantum system that is sufficiently isolated from the environment to maintain quantum coherence, a system whose decoherence rate is low enough to preserve the interbranch interference for a period long enough to be detected. In a macroscopic system at room temperature, the decoherence rate is extraordinarily high. The coherence is destroyed in femtoseconds or less. But in a system that is shielded from environmental interactions, a system that is cooled, isolated, or internally protected from decoherence, the coherence can persist for longer periods, and the interbranch interference can accumulate to detectable levels. The quantum computer is the artificial analog. A quantum computer maintains quantum coherence in its qubits, the quantum bits that exist in superposition, and that can, through their coherent superposition, compute on all branches of the wave function simultaneously. The quantum computer achieves this by isolating the qubits from the environment, cooling them to near absolute zero, shielding them from electromagnetic radiation, and protecting them from the vibrational disturbances that would produce decoherence. The quantum computer is an artificial system that maintains coherence against decoherence, and that can, through the maintained coherence, access the interbranch computation that the decoherence would otherwise destroy. The brain is not a quantum computer in the artificial sense. It operates at body temperature, in a noisy biological environment, surrounded by the electromagnetic fields and chemical interactions that the quantum computer's designers carefully eliminate. But the brain has one advantage that the artificial quantum computer does not. It has been optimized by 4 billion years of evolution to perform quantum computations in a biological environment. The microtubules that the Auchor model identifies as the substrate of quantum consciousness are not exposed to the full thermal noise of the biological environment. They are shielded, protected by the protein lattice of the tubulin dimers, by the ordered water molecules that surround them, and by the specific geometry of the microtubule interior that the biophysicist Travis Craddock has shown can maintain quantum coherence at biological temperatures. The physicist Matthew Fisher at the University of California, Santa Barbara has proposed an alternative substrate for quantum cognition: nuclear spins in phosphorus atoms within the brain. Fisher's Posner molecules, calcium phosphate clusters, that can maintain nuclear spin coherence for periods of hours to days, provide a mechanism for quantum information processing in the brain that is protected from the rapid decoherence that plagues electronic quantum systems. If Fisher's model is correct, The brain has a built-in quantum memory, a system for maintaining quantum coherence over biologically relevant timescales, and for accessing the interbranch quantum information that the coherence preserves. Fisher's model has received support from experimental work showing that lithium, which replaces the phosphorus 3,1 isotope in Posner molecules with the spinless lithium-6 isotope, thereby disrupting the nuclear spin coherence, has dramatic effects on cognition and mood. Lithium is one of the oldest and most effective treatments for bipolar disorder, and Fisher proposes that its efficacy may be related to its disruption of the quantum coherence that Posner molecules maintain. If Fisher is correct, the dreaming brain's quantum coherence is not limited to the microtubules. It extends to the nuclear spins of the phosphorus atoms in the Posner molecules, providing a second, complementary quantum substrate that can maintain coherence over the extended timescales of a full night's sleep. The dreaming brain may be such a system. The suppression of norepinephrine and serotonin during REM sleep reduces the brain's interaction with its own neurochemical environment, reducing the decoherence that the waking brain's full complement of neuromodulators produces. The paralysis of the voluntary muscles during REM reduces the brain's interaction with the external physical environment, eliminating the motor output that would entangle the brain's quantum states with the states of the external world. And the suppression of sensory input during sleep reduces the brain's interaction with the electromagnetic environment, eliminating the photons, the sound waves, and the tactile stimuli that would entangle the brain's quantum states with the states of the sensory world. The dreaming brain is, in effect, a partially isolated quantum system. Its decoherence rate is lower than the waking brain's. Its quantum coherence is more robust, and its sensitivity to interbranch interference is, correspondingly, higher. The dreaming brain may be detecting, during the reduced decoherence window of REM sleep, the faint quantum interference between branches of the wave function, the almost zero but not quite zero signal that leaks through the decoherence barrier and that carries information about other branches of the multiverse. The proposal that the dreaming brain detects interbranch interference has a specific, testable implication. The anomalous information in dreams should correlate with the depth of REM sleep. The deepest REM periods, which occur in the last third of the sleep cycle, which have the longest duration, the most complete norepinephrine suppression, and the most vivid dream content, should produce the most anomalous information, because the decoherence rate is at its lowest and the interbranch interference is at its maximum. The lightest REM periods, which occur in the first third of the sleep cycle, which have the shortest duration and the least complete neurotransmitter suppression, should produce the least anomalous information. This prediction has not been directly tested, but the indirect evidence is consistent. The most vivid, the most bizarre, and the most emotionally intense dreams occur during the deepest REM periods in the last third of the night. The dreams from the early REM periods are typically mundane, fragmentary, and closely related to waking concerns. The dreams from the late REM periods are typically vivid, bizarre, and rich in the impossible, the anomalous, and the uncanny. The progression from mundane to bizarre across the night's REM cycles is consistent with the hypothesis that the interbranch leakage increases as the decoherence decreases. As the norepinephrine suppression deepens, the coherence increases, and the sensitivity to interbranch signals grows. The physicist Paavo Pilkkäinen, a student of David Bohm, has proposed that the dream state corresponds to what Bohm called the soma significance, the level of reality at which the physical soma and the meaningful significance are not yet separated. In the waking state, the physical and the meaningful are experienced as separate. The physical world is out there, and the meaning is in here, in the mind. In the dream state, the separation dissolves. The dream experience is simultaneously physical, it feels real, it has sensory qualities, It occupies space and meaningful. It is symbolically rich, emotionally charged, narratively structured. The dream is the experience of the soma significance level, the level at which the implicate order's enfolded information begins to unfold into the explicate order's manifest forms, carrying both the physical structure and the meaningful content in a single, undivided experience. The information that leaks through is not a complete, high-fidelity representation of the other branch. The leak is faint. The signal is weak. The information is fragmentary, distorted, and mixed with the brain's own internal activity, the stored memories, the motivational concerns, and the emotional processing that constitute the ordinary dream content. The result is the dream as we experience it, a mixture of familiar elements from the brain's stored memories and unfamiliar, bizarre, impossible elements from the interbranch leakage that the brain's narrative-generating machinery stitches together into the strange, compelling, often incomprehensible stories that dreams tell. This framework explains the specific features of dream content that the neuroscience cannot otherwise account for. It explains the bizarre quality of dreams. The dead person who is alive in the dream is alive in another branch, a branch in which the quantum events that led to the person's death occurred differently, producing a different outcome. The building that rearranges itself as the dreamer walks through it is reflecting the different spatial configurations of different branches in which the building was constructed differently, or in which the dreamer's path through the building followed a different trajectory. The ability to fly is reflecting a branch in which the physical conditions are different, a branch with different gravitational conditions, different atmospheric properties, or different physical laws. The bizarre elements of dreams are not the brain's failures of coherent narrative. They are the fragments of other realities, the shards of parallel branches leaking through the decoherence barrier and assembling themselves, in the dreaming brain, into experiences that combine elements from multiple branches into a single, bizarre, multi-reality narrative. The framework also explains the emotional amplification of dreams. The emotional content of a dream that accesses interbranch information is amplified because the information comes from branches in which the emotional events have actually occurred, branches in which the threat is real, the loss is real, the joy is real. The dreaming brain is not merely imagining an emotional scenario, it is detecting the quantum echo of a scenario that has actually been lived in another branch, an echo that carries the full emotional charge of the actual experience. The dream's emotional intensity exceeds the waking mind's emotional range because the emotion in the dream is not generated by the dreamer's own neural processing alone. It is imported, carried into the dream by the interbranch leakage from a branch in which the emotion was generated by actual events. The phenomenon of the big dream, the rare, vivid, profoundly meaningful dream that the dreamer remembers for years or decades, and that feels qualitatively different from ordinary dreams, may represent a moment of unusually strong interbranch leakage. The big dream's extraordinary vividness, emotional power, and sense of reality may be the consequence of a larger than usual opening in the decoherence barrier, a moment in which the interbranch signal is strong enough to dominate the dream experience, producing a perception of another reality that is more vivid, more coherent, and more emotionally powerful than the ordinary dream's mixture of internal processing and faint interbranch noise. The psychologist Carl Jung described the big dream as an eruption of the collective unconscious, the shared, transpersonal, archetypally structured layer of the psyche that connects all human consciousnesses. In the interbranch leakage framework, Jung's collective unconscious is the universal wave function, the total quantum state that contains all branches, all experiences, and all possible configurations of reality. And the big dream's eruption of archetypal content is the dreaming brain's detection of the universal wave functions, deep structure, the patterns, the themes, and the configurations that recur across all branches because they are features of the wave function itself, not of any specific branch. It explains the precognitive quality of some dreams. The future event that the dream contains may have already occurred in another branch, a branch in which the quantum events that produce the future event have already taken place. The information about the event leaks from the branch in which it has already occurred to the branch in which it has not yet occurred through the interbranch interference that the decoherence barrier almost but not quite eliminates. The precognitive dream is not the perception of the future of this branch. It is the perception of the present of another branch, a branch that is, from this branch's perspective, in the future, because the events in that branch are ahead of the events in this branch on the timeline that the two branches share. The physicist Yakir Aharonov's two-state vector formalism provides the mathematical framework for understanding the precognitive dream. In the two-state vector formalism, every quantum system is described by two-state vectors: the forward evolving state, determined by the past, and the backward evolving state, determined by the future. The system's behavior between the two boundary states is determined both by the past that prepared it and by the future that will measure it. The precognitive dream, in this framework, is the dreaming consciousness, perceiving the backward evolving state, the quantum state that is propagating backward in time from a future event, and that is influencing the present consciousness through the retro-causal channel that the two-state vector formalism describes. The backward evolving state does not carry complete information about the future event. It carries partial information, the quantum correlations, the probabilistic tendencies, the informational echoes that the future event sends backward through the quantum channel. The precognitive dream is the dreaming consciousness's perception of these echoes, fragmentary, symbolic, emotionally colored, but containing genuine information about the future event that the backward evolving state carries. The dream is not a movie of the future. It is an echo of the future, a quantum reverberation that the dreaming brain's enhanced coherence allows it to detect. It explains the anomalous information in dream telepathy experiments. The target image that the sender is viewing in the Maimonides experiments exists in the sender's branch, a branch that is, for the duration of the experiment, entangled with the dreamer's branch through the quantum correlations that the experimental setup produces. The information about the target image leaks from the sender's branch to the dreamer's branch through the entanglement that connects them, producing the thematic correspondences that the judges detected. The dream telepathy is not telepathy in the classical sense, the direct transmission of a thought from one mind to another. It is interbranch information leakage, mediated by the entanglement between the sender's and the dreamer's quantum states. It explains the Deja Re that we explored in our investigation of déjà vu, the recognition that the current waking moment matches a specific dream from months or years earlier. The Deja Re is the waking recognition of interbranch leakage that occurred during a previous dream. The dream accessed information from a branch in which the current waking moment had already occurred. The information was encoded in the dream as a specific, detailed, experientially vivid preview of the future moment. And the Deja Re is the moment of recognition, the moment when the waking experience matches the dream preview, and the consciousness recognizes that it has already perceived this moment, not in waking life but in the interbranch leakage of the dream state. The framework also connects to the phenomenon of shared dreams, the rare but well-documented experience in which two or more people report having the same dream on the same night, with specific details that match across the dreamer's independent reports. The shared dream, in the interbranch leakage framework, is the detection of the same interbranch signal by multiple dreamers, multiple brains, in the same reduced decoherent state, detecting the same quantum interference from the same branch and producing the same dream content from the same interbranch source. The shared dream is not telepathy between dreamers. It is the independent reception of the same interbranch signal by multiple receivers, the way two radio receivers tuned to the same frequency receive the same broadcast without communicating with each other. The brain cosmology of string theory provides an additional framework for understanding the multidimensional source of dream information. In string theory, our observable universe may be a three-dimensional membrane, a brain embedded in a higher dimensional bulk space. The bulk space may contain other brains, other three-dimensional universes, each with its own particles, its own forces, and its own conscious observers. The brains are separated by the extra dimensions of the bulk, and the only force that can propagate through the bulk between brains is gravity. The other force is electromagnetism. The strong force, the weak force are confined to the brains and cannot reach from one brain to another, but gravity can reach between brains. And if the Penrose-Hameroff-Orchard model is correct, if consciousness involves quantum gravitational processes in the microtubules, then the consciousness may have access to gravitational information from other brains. The dreaming brain, with its reduced decoherence and its enhanced quantum sensitivity, may be detecting gravitational signals from other brains, signals that carry information about the events, the structures, and the experiences occurring in other universes. The bizarre elements of dreams, the impossible physics, the alien landscapes, the experiences that violate every known law of nature may be fragments of other brains, leaking through the gravitational channel that the extra dimensions provide. The physicist Lisa Randall at Harvard has developed the most comprehensive model of brain cosmology, showing that the extra dimensions can be large, not curled up at the Planck scale, as earlier string theory models assumed, but extended, macroscopic, and capable of transmitting gravitational signals over distances that are accessible to physical processes. Randall's model, if correct, implies that other brains may be close to ours, separated by a distance in the bulk that is small enough for gravitational signals to cross. And the crossing of gravitational signals between brains is the crossing of information between universes, information that the dreaming brain's quantum gravitational processes may be detecting. The cosmologist Neil Turok, in collaboration with Paul Steinhardt, has proposed the ekpyrotic model of cosmology, a model in which the Big Bang was produced by the collision of two brains in the higher dimensional bulk. The collision produced the hot, dense, rapidly expanding universe that we observe, and the collisions may recur, the brains may oscillate, approaching and receding cyclically, producing a sequence of big bangs and cosmic expansions that the cyclic model describes. If the brains are close to each other, if the distance between our brain and a neighboring brain in the extra dimensions is small, then the gravitational signals between them may be detectable. The physicist Raman Sundaram, who co-developed the Randall-Sundaram model of extra dimensions, has proposed that the dark matter that constitutes 27% of our universe's mass energy may be matter on a neighboring brain, matter that we perceive only through its gravitational effects, because gravity is the only force that can cross the brain separation. If dark matter is brain matter, then the gravitational channel between brains is not merely theoretical. It is observationally confirmed. The rotation curves of galaxies, the gravitational lensing of distant light sources, and the dynamics of galaxy clusters are all evidence that gravitational information is crossing from another brain to ours. The dreaming brain's quantum gravitational sensitivity, if the Orchard model is correct, may be detecting not only the gravitational effects of dark matter, but the informational content that the gravitational signals from other brains carry. The dark matter that surrounds us may be the shadow of another universe, a universe whose events, structures, and experiences are encoded in the gravitational signals that cross the brain separation, and that the dreaming brain's enhanced quantum sensitivity can perceive. The combination of many worlds and brain cosmology produces a picture of reality in which the information available to the dreaming consciousness is vastly larger than the information available to the waking consciousness. The waking consciousness, with its high decoherence rate and its sensory-focused filtering, perceives only the local, present moment, single branch, single brain information that biological survival requires. The dreaming consciousness, with its reduced decoherence and its removed filtering, perceives a wider range, accessing information from other branches of the wave function, from other temporal locations in the block universe, and possibly from other brains in the higher dimensional bulk. The dreams are the leak, the sleeping brain is the receiver, and the bizarre, the impossible, and the anomalous elements of dreams are the fragments of a multidimensional reality that is bleeding through the decoherence barrier and the brain separation into the dreaming consciousness. The dreams are the most common, the most frequent, and the most accessible portal to the multidimensional reality that the physics describes. Every person dreams every night. Every person has access, during the 2 hours of nightly REM sleep, to the reduced decoherence window through which the interbranch and interbrain information can leak into the conscious experience. The portal is not exotic. It is ordinary as sleep, as universal as dreaming, and as accessible as closing your eyes at the end of the day. The extraordinary quality of dreams, their vividness, their bizarreness, their emotional power, their occasional access to information that the waking mind cannot obtain, may be the ordinary consequence of a consciousness that is, every night, briefly exposed to the multidimensional reality that the waking mind's decoherence barrier normally conceals. The dreams are not an anomaly. They are a window that opens every night, for every person, onto a reality that is vaster, more complex, and more informationally rich than anything the waking consciousness can perceive. We must be honest about the status of this framework. The many worlds interpretation is one of the leading interpretations of quantum mechanics, endorsed by a significant and growing number of physicists, but the detection of interbranch interference by a macroscopic system has not been demonstrated. The proposal that the dreaming brain's reduced decoherence is sufficient to detect interbranch signals is plausible but unproven. The brain cosmology is a specific, mathematically developed prediction of string theory. But string theory has not been experimentally confirmed, the existence of other brains has not been detected, and the proposal that the dreaming brain can receive gravitational signals from other brains is highly speculative. And the anomalous dream data, the Maimonides experiments, the precognitive dream reports, the Deja Re phenomenon, is suggestive but not conclusive. The data is consistent with the interbranch leakage hypothesis, but it is also consistent with other hypotheses, including the hypothesis that the data is an artifact of methodological flaws, statistical anomalies, and the human tendency to find patterns in noise. The convergence between the frameworks is itself significant. The many worlds interpretation says information exists in other branches. The decoherence theory says the barrier between branches is almost but not perfectly opaque. The Orcho-R model says the brain has quantum processes that could detect interbranch signals. The brain cosmology says other universes may be gravitationally accessible. And the dream neuroscience says the dreaming brain is in a state of reduced decoherence that enhances its quantum sensitivity. Each framework provides a different piece of the puzzle. Together, they describe a coherent mechanism by which the dreaming brain could access information from beyond the boundaries of the single branch and the single brain that the waking consciousness inhabits. The contemplative traditions have been describing this access for millennia, not through the language of quantum mechanics and brain cosmology, but through the language of subtle realms, dream portals, and visionary states. The convergence between the physics and the traditions is not a proof, but it is a signal that the investigation is pointing in the right direction, that the dreams are not mere neural noise, and that the information they contain may be exactly what the framework predicts. Fragments of a multidimensional reality leaking through the barriers between worlds and assembling themselves in the dreaming consciousness into the extraordinary, the impossible, and the real. What we can say is this: the framework is physically grounded, it makes specific predictions, and it provides a coherent, unified explanation for the specific features of dream content that the standard neuroscience cannot account for. The framework is not proven, but it is not mere speculation. It is a hypothesis that the physics permits, that the data supports, and that the contemplative traditions have been describing in their own languages for millennia. In the next stage, we will explore the contemplative tradition's understanding of dreams as portals to multidimensional reality in detail, the specific practices, the specific maps, and the specific technologies that each tradition has developed for navigating the dream state's access to the wider reality that the decoherence barrier and the brain separation normally conceal. We have established that dreams contain information that the sleeping brain's normal sensory channels do not provide, and that the quantum physics of the multiverse offers a specific mechanism for the anomalous information. The decoherence barrier that separates the branches of the wave function is weakened during REM sleep, allowing information from other branches, other configurations of reality, other versions of the present, other possibilities that the many worlds interpretation says are equally real, to leak through the barrier and enter the dreaming consciousness as the bizarre, impossible, multi-reality fragments that dreams display. Now we must examine what the contemplative traditions say about dreams as portals to other realities. Because the traditions have been investigating the dream state through the instrument of trained consciousness for far longer than either neuroscience or quantum physics has existed, and their descriptions of the dream's relationship to other levels of reality provide an extraordinary body of experiential data that the quantum frameworks are only now beginning to formalize. We will begin with Hinduism, which provides the most comprehensive philosophical framework for understanding dreams as perceptions of other realities. The Hindu understanding of dreams is built on a specific cosmological foundation. Reality is multi-layered. The Mandukya Upanishad identifies 4 states of consciousness: waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and turiya, and each state corresponds to a different layer of reality. The waking state perceives the gross physical layer, the virat, the visible universe of matter and energy. The dreaming state perceives the subtle layer, the hiranyagarbha, the golden womb, the luminous realm of mental forms, emotional energies, and informational patterns that underlies the physical layer. The deep sleep state rests in the causal layer, the Ishvara, the divine creative potency from which both the subtle and the gross layers emerge. And Turiya transcends all 3 layers, perceiving the Brahman, the infinite, undifferentiated ground from which every layer, every state, and every reality arises. The subtle layer is not a metaphor. It is an ontological level, a genuine stratum of reality that is as real as the physical layer, but that operates through different principles. The subtle layer is not spatial in the ordinary sense. It does not have the 3-dimensional extension that the physical layer displays. It is not temporal in the ordinary sense. It does not flow from past to future in the linear sequence that the waking consciousness experiences. And it is not governed by the physical laws that constrain the gross layer. The laws of thermodynamics, the speed of light, the gravitational constant, do not apply in the subtle realm. The subtle layer operates through the laws of mind, through association, through intention, through the karmic resonances that connect experiences across time, space, and lifetimes. The physicist Erwin Schrödinger, whose engagement with the Vedantic tradition we have encountered throughout this series, described the subtle layer in terms that bridge the Hindu and the quantum frameworks. The world is given to me only once, not one existing and one perceived. Subject and object are only one. In the subtle layer, the distinction between the perceiver and the perceived dissolves. The dreamer and the dream are one. The consciousness and its content are unified, and the experience has the non-dual quality that the Vedanta identifies with the deeper levels of reality. The dream, in this framework, is not a hallucination. It is a perception of the subtle layer, the Hiranyagarbha, the level of reality that is more fundamental than the physical layer but less fundamental than the causal layer. The subtle layer contains information that the physical layer does not, information about the past, the future, the hidden connections between events, and the karmic patterns that shape the trajectory of individual lives. The dreaming consciousness accesses this information because the dreaming consciousness is perceiving the subtle layer directly without the mediation of the physical senses that the waking consciousness requires. The Yoga Vasishtha provides the most radical Hindu account of the dream's reality. The sage Vasishtha tells Rama, the dream world and the waking world are both projections of the same consciousness. The dream is not less real than the waking world. The waking world is not more real than the dream. Both are appearances in consciousness. Both are dreams, dreamed by the infinite consciousness that constitutes the ground of all reality. The statement is not metaphorical. It is ontological, a claim about the fundamental nature of reality. The waking world is a dream. The dream world is a dream. And the difference between them is not a difference of reality but a difference of mode, a difference in the way that consciousness projects its content, not a difference in the ontological status of the content projected. Shankara, in his commentary on the Brahma Sutras, uses the dream precisely as an argument for the illusory nature of the waking world. If the dream world which appears completely real while the dream lasts is revealed as a projection when the dreamer wakes, then the waking world which appears completely real while waking lasts may similarly be revealed as a projection when the consciousness achieves the awakening that the spiritual traditions describe. The dream is the proof of concept for Maya. It demonstrates that consciousness can generate a complete, convincing, experientially real world that is, from a deeper perspective, a projection rather than a fundamental reality. The philosopher Zhuangzi expressed the same insight with his famous butterfly dream. Once Zhuangzi dreamt he was a butterfly, fluttering happily. He did not know he was Zhuangzi. Suddenly he woke up, and there he was, solid and unmistakable Zhuangzi. But he did not know if he was Zhuangzi who had dreamt he was a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming he was Zhuangzi. The parable captures the ontological symmetry between the waking state and the dream state, the symmetry that the Yoga Vasishtha asserts, and that the quantum physics of the multiverse, with its multiple equally real branches, supports. The implication is extraordinary. If the waking world and the dream world are both projections of the same consciousness, then the dream world is a genuine reality, a genuine configuration of consciousness, a genuine projection of the creative power that produces all realities. The dead person who appears alive in the dream is alive in the dream reality, in the subtle layer, in the configuration of consciousness that the dream projects. The building that rearranges itself is rearranging itself in the dream reality, where the spatial constraints of the physical layer do not apply. And the information that the dream contains, the information about future events, about distant locations, about other people's mental states, is real information, perceived through the dream's access to the subtle layer that the waking consciousness cannot reach. The practice of yoga nidra, yogic sleep, the systematic cultivation of conscious awareness in the state between waking and sleeping, is the Hindu technology for exploring the dream's reality deliberately. The practitioner of yoga nidra lies down, relaxes the body, and progressively withdraws the consciousness from the physical senses, entering a state that is physiologically similar to sleep, but that maintains the thread of conscious awareness. In this state, the practitioner perceives the subtle layer, directly perceiving the mental forms, the emotional energies, and the informational patterns that the physical senses cannot detect. The practice is not visualization. The practitioner is not imagining the subtle layer. The practitioner is perceiving it directly, experientially, with the same immediacy and the same certainty that the waking consciousness perceives the physical layer. The modern researcher Kamakhya Kumar at Banaras Hindu University has studied the neurophysiological effects of Yoga Nidra and found that the practice produces a specific brain state that is distinct from both waking and sleeping. Enhanced theta wave activity, the brainwave frequency associated with the hypnagogic state between waking and sleeping, reduced cortical arousal, and maintained conscious awareness. The state is physiologically similar to REM sleep. In some respects, the visual cortex is active. The default mode network is partially suppressed, but differs in that the prefrontal cortex maintains a level of activation that the ordinary REM state does not display. The Yoga Nidra practitioner is in a controlled, conscious, prefrontally monitored version of the dream state, a state that combines the dream state's access to the subtle layer with the waking state's evaluative capacity. The practice of Yoga Nidra has been shown to produce specific experiences that are consistent with the perception of the subtle layer: vivid, spontaneous, involuntary visual and auditory experiences that the practitioner does not generate deliberately, and that often contain information that the practitioner identifies as meaningful, revelatory, or previously unknown. The experiences are not dreams in the ordinary sense. The practitioner is not asleep and is maintaining conscious awareness throughout. They are perceptions, direct, conscious perceptions of the subtle layer that the Yoga Nidra state makes accessible. The Brihadaranyaka Upanishad describes the dreaming consciousness with an image of stunning precision. In the dream state, the self takes apart the material of this world and creates another world with its own luminosity. In the dream state, there are no chariots, no roads, no horses, but the self creates chariots, roads, and horses. There are no joys, no pleasures, no pools, but the self creates joys, pleasures, and pools, for the self is the creator. The dreaming self is not a passive receiver of random neural signals. It is a creator, a consciousness that generates entire worlds from its own creative power, and the worlds it generates are not arbitrary. They are drawn from the subtle layer, the level of reality where the informational patterns that the physical world expresses exist in their pure, unmanifest, creatively potent form. The concept of the dream as a creation connects directly to the quantum physics of the multiverse. In the many worlds interpretation, every quantum event produces multiple branches, each containing a different outcome. The branches are all real, they all exist, and they all contain complete, self-consistent realities. The dreaming consciousness, in the Hindu framework, is doing what the quantum event does, creating realities, projecting worlds, manifesting configurations of consciousness that are as real, as complete, and as self-consistent as the waking world. The dream is a branch of the wave function, a configuration of consciousness that the creative power has projected into existence and that the dreaming mind inhabits as a genuine reality. The connection between the Hindu dream cosmology and the quantum multiverse has been explored by the physicist Amit Goswami, who argues that the Vedantic framework and the many worlds interpretation describe the same reality in different languages. The Vedantic Hiranyagarbha, the subtle layer that the dream accesses, is the quantum superposition of all possible states of reality. The physical layer, the Virat, that the waking consciousness perceives is one specific branch of the superposition, selected by the act of conscious observation. And the dream, freed from the observational constraints that select the physical branch, perceives the superposition, directly experiencing multiple branches, multiple possibilities, and multiple configurations of reality simultaneously. Goswami's framework explains the bizarre quality of dreams, the impossibility, the juxtaposition of incompatible elements, the dead who are alive, and the buildings that rearrange themselves. All are the experience of a consciousness that is perceiving multiple branches of the wave function simultaneously, experiencing elements from different branches intermixed in a single, composite, multi-reality experience that the waking mind, constrained to a single branch, would never produce. In Buddhism, the tradition of dream yoga provides the most detailed and the most practice-based account of dreams as portals to other realities. The Tibetan Buddhist tradition distinguishes between two types of dreams: samsaric dreams and clarity dreams. Samsaric dreams are the ordinary dreams, the recombination of waking memories, the processing of emotional concerns. The karmic residue of the day's experience is reassembled in the symbolic, emotionally charged, narratively loose form that characterizes most dreaming. Clarity dreams are extraordinary dreams, dreams that contain information from beyond the ordinary sources, that display a vividness and a coherence that exceeds the samsaric dream, and that are experienced by the dreamer as qualitatively different from the ordinary dream, carrying a sense of significance, of revelation, and of contact with a deeper level of reality. The clarity dream is the dream that accesses other realities. The Tibetan tradition describes several categories of clarity dream: the prophecy dream, which contains specific information about future events; the teaching dream, in which the dreamer receives spiritual instruction from a teacher who may be deceased, who may be in a distant location, or who may exist in a different realm of reality; the visitation dream, in which the dreamer encounters beings from other realms, devas, bodhisattvas, deceased relatives who communicate information that the dreamer could not have known; and the bardo dream, in which the dreamer perceives the intermediate state between death and rebirth, experiencing the clear light, the peaceful and wrathful deities, and the process of consciousness transitioning between lives. The practice of dream yoga milam is the systematic training for recognizing, cultivating, and navigating clarity dreams. The practice has 4 stages. The first stage is dream recognition, the development of lucid awareness within the dream, the ability to recognize the dream as a dream while the dream is occurring. The second stage is dream transformation, the ability to change the content of the dream deliberately, demonstrating that the dream reality is malleable, that it responds to the dreamer's intention, and that the dreamer is not a passive observer but an active participant in the dream's reality. The third stage is dream multiplication, the ability to create multiple dream bodies, to be present in multiple dream locations simultaneously, and to perceive the dream reality from multiple perspectives at once. And the fourth stage is dream dissolution, the ability to dissolve the dream into the clear light, perceiving the luminous ground of consciousness from which the dream reality arose and into which it dissolves. The 4 stages of dream yoga map onto the quantum physics of the multiverse with remarkable precision. Dream recognition is the recognition that the current reality is one branch of the wave function, one configuration among many, one dream among many, one projection of consciousness among the infinite projections that the creative power produces. Dream transformation is the demonstration that the branch is malleable, that the consciousness can influence the configuration of the branch through intention, through observation, through the participatory act that Wheeler identified as the mechanism by which conscious beings bring physical reality into existence. Dream multiplication is the perception of multiple branches simultaneously, the experience of being present in multiple configurations of reality at the same time, perceiving the multiverse from within. And dream dissolution is the perception of the quantum vacuum, the luminous, empty, creatively potent ground state from which all branches arise and into which all branches dissolve. The 6 yogas of Naropa, the foundational tantric practices of the Kagyu lineage of Tibetan Buddhism, include dream yoga as one of the 6 essential practices, alongside inner heat, tummo, illusory body, clear light, consciousness transference power, and bardo yoga. The inclusion of dream yoga among the 6 most important tantric practices demonstrates the tradition's assessment of the dream state's spiritual significance. The dream is not a peripheral phenomenon. It is a central practice, a primary technology for the exploration of consciousness and reality that is as important as the practices of meditation, energy work, and death preparation. Naropa's dream yoga instructions, transmitted through the Indian Mahasiddha tradition and preserved in the Tibetan Kagyu lineage, specify that the dream yogi should begin by recognizing that the waking world is dreamlike, that the solidity, the permanence, and the independent existence that the waking world appears to possess are as illusory as the solidity that the dream world appears to possess while the dream lasts. The recognition of the waking world's dreamlike nature is the prerequisite for the recognition of the dream's reality, because the 2 recognitions are the same insight applied in opposite directions. The waking world is less solid than it appears. The dream world is more real than it appears, and the consciousness that perceives both is the reality that neither the waking world nor the dream world can contain. The Tibetan master Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, one of the foremost living teachers of dream yoga, describes the practice's purpose with precision. The point of dream yoga is not to have interesting dreams. The point is to recognize the dreamlike nature of all experience, to see that the waking world, like the dream world, is a projection of consciousness, and that the consciousness that projects both worlds is the clear light that is your own deepest nature. The dream yoga practitioner does not merely explore the dream. They use the dream as a laboratory, a controlled environment in which the nature of reality as projection, as creation, as consciousness manifesting in form can be investigated directly, experientially, and with a rigor that the waking state's solidity and convincingness make difficult to achieve. The Dzogchen tradition adds a specific dimension through the practice of the dark retreat, the practice of meditating in complete darkness for extended periods, typically 3 to 49 days. The dark retreat produces a progression of visual phenomena, lights, colors, geometric patterns, and eventually complex, vivid, cinematically detailed visions that arise spontaneously in the absolute darkness. The visions are not hallucinations in the pathological sense. They are structured, progressive, and consistent across practitioners following a specific sequence that the tradition describes and that the practice reliably produces. The tradition interprets the visions as the direct perception of the Thogal lights, the luminous manifestations of the clear light mind, perceived directly when the visual system is freed from the constraint of processing external visual input and is available to perceive the internal luminosity of consciousness itself. The dark retreat visions are relevant to the information leakage hypothesis because they demonstrate that the brain, deprived of external sensory input, generates structured, informationally rich, visually detailed experiences from an internal source, a source that is not memory. The visions are not recombinations of stored visual experiences, not imagination. The visions are involuntary and do not respond to the practitioner's intention, and not random neural noise. The visions follow a specific, reproducible, tradition-consistent sequence. The source, according to the Dzogchen tradition, is the clear light, the luminous ground of consciousness that constitutes the hidden layer from which all experiences, waking and dreaming, are projected. The neuroscientist Katja Valley at the University of Turku has studied the phenomenology of dark retreat experiences and found that the visual phenomena follow a consistent progression that is reported by practitioners across different traditions and different cultural backgrounds. First, simple phosphonese dots and flashes of light, then geometric patterns, grids, spirals, lattices, then complex formed images, faces, landscapes, scenes, and finally immersive, three-dimensional, cinematically detailed environments that the practitioner inhabits as a fully embodied participant. The progression is consistent with the Dzogchen tradition's description and suggests that the visual system, deprived of external input, progressively accesses deeper layers of internal information from the simplest random neural firing through the structural geometric patterns reflecting the visual cortex's architecture to the complex, organized, informationally rich content from the subtle layer or the hidden informational substrate. The dark retreat's progression from simple to complex visual phenomena parallels the progression from ordinary dreams to clarity dreams to clear light perception, suggesting that the same information source is accessed in both cases, and that the depth of access depends on the duration and the intensity of the sensory deprivation. The longer the practitioner remains in darkness, the deeper the access. The longer the dreamer remains in REM, the more vivid and informationally rich the dream becomes. Both progressions point to the same conclusion. The brain, freed from external sensory input, progressively opens its channel to an internal information source that is richer, deeper, and more informationally dense than the external world that the senses normally provide. In Christianity, the tradition of visionary experience provides a framework for understanding dreams as portals to divine reality. The Christian tradition distinguishes between three types of vision, a classification developed by Augustine in the 5th century. The corporeal vision is a vision perceived through the physical senses, a visible, tangible, physically present manifestation that multiple witnesses can observe. The imaginative vision is a vision perceived through the internal senses, a vivid, detailed, emotionally powerful image that arises in the mind's eye, often during sleep or contemplative prayer, and that the visionary perceives with the same clarity and the same immediacy as a physical perception. And the intellectual vision is a vision perceived without images, a direct, non-sensory, purely cognitive apprehension of a truth that the intellect grasps without the mediation of any sensory or imaginative content. The imaginative vision, Augustine's second category, is the category that corresponds most closely to the dream. The prophetic dreams of the biblical tradition are imaginative visions, vivid, detailed, symbolically rich images that arise during sleep and that contain information from a divine source. Joseph's interpretation of Pharaoh's dreams, Daniel's interpretation of Nebuchadnezzar's dreams, and the angel's warning to Joseph in a dream are all imaginative visions, dreams that access a level of reality beyond the dreamer's ordinary knowledge and that contain information that the dreamer could not have obtained through normal channels. The tradition of incubation, the deliberate seeking of divine dreams through ritual preparation, prayer, and sleeping in sacred spaces, was practiced in early Christianity as it had been practiced in the Greek and Egyptian traditions before it. The Christian incubation tradition, centered on the churches of saints with healing reputations, involved prayer, fasting, and sleeping in the church in the expectation of receiving a dream that contained divine guidance, healing, or revelation. The practice was based on the explicit belief that the dream state provides access to a level of reality that the waking state does not, a level at which the divine can communicate directly with the human consciousness through the reduced filtering of the sleeping mind. The Desert Father, Evagrius Ponticus, whose work on contemplative perception we have encountered in previous investigations, classified dreams according to their spiritual source. Dreams from the passions, generated by the unresolved emotional conflicts of the waking mind. Dreams from demons, generated by spiritual forces that seek to deceive the dreamer. And dreams from God, generated by the divine communication that the purified consciousness can receive. The classification is a spiritual filter theory, a framework for distinguishing the signal, divine dreams from the noise, passion-driven and demonic dreams, based on the spiritual quality of the dreamer's consciousness. The purer the consciousness, the clearer the signal. The more disordered the consciousness, the more the signal is distorted by the noise. The medieval Christian mystic Hildegard of Bingen described her visionary experiences which occurred in a state between waking and sleeping as perceptions of the living light, a luminous, informationally rich, divinely originated light that carried specific, detailed, theologically significant content. Hildegard's living light is structurally identical to the Tibetan tradition's clear light and to the Hindu tradition's Hiranyagarbha, a luminous ground of reality that is perceived when the ordinary sensory, cognitive filtering is reduced, and that carries information from a level of reality that is deeper, richer, and more fundamental than the physical surface. Hildegard's living light was not passive illumination. It carried content-specific, detailed, theologically complex content that Hildegard recorded in 3 major visionary works: the Civias, the Liber Vitae Meritorum, and the Liber Divinorum Operum. The content included cosmological visions, the structure of the universe as a series of concentric spheres, with the human being at the center, theological visions, the relationship between the divine persons of the Trinity, and prophetic visions, future events that Hildegard described with a specificity that her contemporaries found remarkable. The living light was not merely a light, it was an information channel, a channel that carried specific, detailed, verifiable information from a level of reality that Hildegard's ordinary waking consciousness could not access. The 20th century Catholic mystic Adrian von Speer reported similar experiences receiving, in states between waking and sleeping, detailed visions of biblical events that she described as experiencing from within, as though she were a participant rather than an observer. Von Speer's visions contained specific sensory details, smells, textures, temperatures, sounds that exceeded what her biblical knowledge could have supplied. Her theologian Hans Urs von Balthasar, who recorded and analyzed her visions over 3 decades, concluded that the visions contained genuine information from a level of reality that von Speer accessed through a perceptual faculty that the ordinary consciousness does not normally employ. The Orthodox Christian tradition's concept of theoria, the direct contemplative perception of divine reality, includes the perception of spiritual realities through dreams and visions. The Philokalia describes the progression from ordinary dreams, which are colored by the passions and the memories of the waking mind, through purified dreams, which are freed from the passions and which begin to contain spiritual content, to divine dreams, which are granted by the Holy Spirit and which contain genuine revelations of spiritual truth. The progression mirrors the Buddhist progression from samsaric to clarity to clear light dreams, and the mechanism is the same. The progressive purification of consciousness through sustained contemplative practice opens the dream's channel to deeper levels of reality. The convergence across the traditions on the nature of dreams as portals to other realities can now be stated with precision. Hinduism says, the dream perceives the subtle layer, the Hiranyagarbha, the level of reality that underlies the physical surface and that contains information that the physical senses cannot detect. Buddhism says, the dream can access other realms, other times, and other realities through the clarity that sustained practice develops. Christianity says, the dream is a channel for divine communication, carrying information from a level of reality that transcends the ordinary sensory world. And each tradition provides specific practices for developing the dream's capacity. Yoga Nidra in Hinduism, Milam in Buddhism, contemplative prayer, and the purification of the passions in Christianity. The Taoist tradition adds a specific perspective through the concept of Hun and Po, the two types of soul that Taoism identifies. The Hun is the ethereal soul, the aspect of consciousness that is mobile, that can travel during sleep, and that perceives the subtle realms. The Po is the corporeal soul, the aspect of consciousness that is bound to the body and that dissolves at death. During sleep, the Hun separates from the Po, traveling through the subtle realms, perceiving other realities, and returning to the body upon waking with the fragmentary memories that the dreams contain. The dream is the Hun's journey, the ethereal soul's exploration of the multidimensional reality that the corporeal soul, bound to the physical body, cannot access. The Taoist practice of spirit travel, the deliberate cultivation of the Hun's ability to separate from the Po and to navigate the subtle realms consciously, is another technology for dream exploration that parallels the Buddhist dream yoga and the Hindu yoga nidra. The spirit traveler learns to maintain conscious awareness while the Hun separates from the body, to navigate the subtle realms deliberately rather than randomly, and to bring back specific, detailed, verifiable information from the journeys. The Australian Aboriginal concept of the dream time, the Chukurpa, describes an entire dimension of reality that is accessed through the dream state, and that is, in Aboriginal ontology, more fundamental and more real than the waking world. The dream time is not the past. It is a concurrent reality, a level of existence that coexists with the waking world, and that can be accessed through the dream, through ritual, and through the specific initiatory practices of the Aboriginal tradition. The dream time is the subtle layer described in Aboriginal terms, the level of reality where the ancestors created the world, where the songs that sustain the landscape continue to sound, and where the information that structures the physical world is continuously available to the consciousness that knows how to access it. The traditions agree, dreams are not noise, they are signal, a signal from a level of reality that the waking consciousness cannot normally access, that the sleeping consciousness can perceive, because the waking mind's filtering is reduced, and that the trained consciousness can access deliberately through the specific practices that each tradition has developed for navigating the multidimensional structure of reality through the portal of the dream. In the final stage, we will bring everything together, the neuroscience of dreaming, the quantum physics of the multiverse, and the contemplative tradition's technologies for dream exploration, and ask what information leakage through dreams reveals about the nature of reality, the nature of consciousness, and the relationship between the waking world, the dream world, and the hidden layers of the multiverse that the dream may be providing access to. We have now examined dreams through every available lens. The neuroscience has described the mechanism, the REM state suppression of norepinephrine and serotonin, the hyperactivation of the amygdala and the visual cortex, the deactivation of the prefrontal cortex, and the dopaminergic motivational system's generation of simulated experiences that reflect the dreamer's deepest concerns. The quantum physics has offered the framework, the many worlds interpretation's branching wave function, the decoherence barrier that separates the branches, and the dreaming brain's reduced decoherence that may allow quantum information from other branches to leak through the barrier. And the contemplative traditions have described the dream state as a portal to deeper layers of reality, a state in which the waking mind's filtering is reduced. The hidden layers information becomes accessible, and the consciousness perceives dimensions of reality that the waking state conceals. Now we must bring everything together and ask what the information leakage thesis means for the nature of dreams, for the nature of reality, and for you. Let us begin with what the information leakage thesis means for dreams. The conventional understanding of dreams treats them as internal productions, narratives generated by the brain from its stored memories, its emotional conflicts, and its motivational concerns. The dream is a story the brain tells itself while it sleeps. The characters are composites of familiar people. The settings are recombinations of familiar places. The plots are rearrangements of familiar situations. And the bizarre, the impossible, and the anomalous elements are errors, glitches in the narrative synthesis, failures of the story-making process, noise in the signal. The information leakage thesis reverses this interpretation. The bizarre elements are not noise, they are signal. They are not the brain's failure to construct a coherent narrative from internal resources. They are the brain's reception of information from external sources, sources that exist in other branches of the wave function, in other configurations of the multiverse, and in the hidden layers of reality that the waking mind's decoherence normally prevents from being perceived. The dead person who appears alive in the dream is not a memory error. The dead person may be alive in another branch of the wave function, and the dream is detecting the quantum echo of that branch, leaking through the decoherence barrier during the REM state's reduced filtering. The building that rearranges itself is not a narrative glitch. It may be the perception of different spatial configurations from different branches, superimposed in the dreaming consciousness that is spread across multiple branches simultaneously. And the ability to fly is not a wish fulfillment fantasy. It may be the perception of a branch in which the dreamer's relationship to gravity, space, and embodiment is different from the relationship that the waking branch enforces. The physicist David Deutsch's proposal that dreams are the subjective experience of quantum computation in superposition provides the mechanism for this reversal. If the dreaming brain computes in superposition, exploring multiple quantum states simultaneously, processing information from multiple branches of the wave function concurrently, then the dream experience is the conscious correlate of this multi-branch computation. The dream is not a single narrative played out in a single branch. It is a superposition of narratives from multiple branches, a multi-threaded experience that the waking consciousness, operating in a single collapsed branch, cannot produce, but that the dreaming consciousness, operating in superposition, naturally generates. The mechanism has a specific neurological basis. The neuroscientist Giulio Tononi, whose integrated information theory we have encountered throughout this series, has proposed that the dreaming brain's phi, its integrated information, is restructured during REM. The waking brain's phi is organized around the sensory input integrating the visual, auditory, tactile, and proprioceptive information from the external world into a unified conscious experience of the physical environment. The dreaming brain's phi is organized around the internal processing, integrating the memory traces, the emotional patterns, and the quantum information from the microtubules into a unified conscious experience of the internal landscape. The restructuring of phi during REM is the shift from externally organized to internally organized consciousness, a shift that the information leakage thesis interprets as the shift from single-branch perception to multi-branch perception. The physicist Penrose has noted that the OR model predicts specific differences between the quantum processes of the waking and the dreaming brain. The waking brain's microtubule quantum computations are constrained by the continuous sensory input, the flood of classical information from the senses that continuously collapses the quantum superpositions and that limits the precision-animations of Tomanin's coherence time of the microtubule computations. The dreaming brain's microtubule computations are freed from the sensory input, the senses are shut off, the classical information flow is interrupted, and the quantum superpositions can persist for longer periods, exploring more of the quantum state space and accessing more of the Planck scale information that the waking brain's sensory bombardment prevents from being perceived. The prediction is specific and testable. The quantum coherence time in the microtubules should be longer during REM than during waking. The technology to measure this does not yet exist, but the prediction connects the information leakage thesis to the quantum biology program and provides a specific experimental target for future investigation. This explains the specific phenomenological features of dreams that the conventional theories cannot account for. It explains the bizarreness. The bizarre juxtapositions, the impossible physics, the sudden scene changes, and the logical contradictions that characterize dreams are the interference patterns between different branches of the wave function. When two branches contain incompatible elements, a building that is simultaneously a school and a hospital, a person who is simultaneously your mother and your colleague, a time that is simultaneously morning and night, the superposition of the two branches produces the bizarre, contradictory, dream logic experience that the dreamer reports. The bizarreness is not a defect of the dream. It is the signature of multi-branch perception, the characteristic pattern that results from the simultaneous perception of incompatible realities. It explains the emotional intensity. The dreams are emotionally amplified because the quantum information from multiple branches includes the emotional content of those branches. The dreamer is not experiencing the emotions of a single narrative. The dreamer is experiencing the superposition of the emotions from multiple narratives, the combined emotional charge of all the branches that the dream is sampling. The terror is more intense than any waking fear, because it includes the fear from multiple branches. The joy is more overwhelming than any waking pleasure, because it includes the joy from multiple branches. The emotional amplification is the result of emotional superposition, the addition of the emotional content from all the branches that the dreaming consciousness perceives. It explains the feeling of significance. Dreamers frequently report that their dreams feel meaningful, that the dream is trying to communicate something important, that the events in the dream carry a significance that exceeds their literal content. The feeling of significance is the consciousness's detection of genuine information, the awareness, at a subverbal, subconceptual level, that the dream contains data from a source that is wider, deeper, and more informationally rich than the brain's stored memories. The significance is real because the information is real. The dream is not merely a story. It is a report, a fragmentary, distorted, emotionally coded report from the multiverse that the consciousness recognizes at the deepest level as genuine. The psychoanalyst Carl Jung described this felt significance as the dream's numinous quality, the sense of encountering something sacred, something transpersonal, something that exceeds the dreamer's individual psychology. Jung attributed the numinosity to the collective unconscious, the transpersonal layer of the psyche that connects the individual consciousness to the species' accumulated experience. In the information leakage framework, Jung's collective unconscious is the universal wave function, the total quantum state that contains all branches, all lives, and all realities. And the numinosity of the dream is the consciousness's recognition that it is perceiving something from beyond its individual branch, something from the universal wave function that contains the individual branch, and infinitely more besides. It explains the anomalous information. The precognitive dream that contains specific details about future events is detecting quantum information from a branch in which those events have already occurred, a branch that is ahead of the dreamer's branch in the temporal sequence, and whose information is leaking through the decoherence barrier to the dreaming consciousness. The telepathic dream that contains information about another person's current experience is detecting the quantum entanglement between the dreamer's consciousness and the other person's consciousness, an entanglement that the waking mind's decoherence normally conceals, but that the dreaming mind's reduced decoherence allows to be perceived. And the past life dream that contains specific details about a previous incarnation is detecting the quantum correlations that carry the karmic pattern from one life to another, correlations that are always present in the entanglement structure of the block universe, but that are normally inaccessible to the waking consciousness. Now, let us consider what the information leakage thesis means for reality. The most radical implication is that the reality you inhabit while awake is not the only reality. The many worlds interpretation describes a vast, ever-expanding tree of branches, each one containing a complete, self-consistent, fully real version of the universe. The branches are normally invisible to each other, separated by the decoherence that prevents quantum interference between macroscopic systems. But the information leakage thesis proposes that the separation is not absolute. The decoherence barrier is not a wall, it is a filter that the waking brain's neurochemistry strengthens, and that the dreaming brain's neurochemistry weakens. And through the weakened filter, the information from other branches leaks into the dreaming consciousness, producing the bizarre, anomalous, multi-reality experience that we call a dream. If this is correct, then dreams are not internal hallucinations. They are external perceptions of realities that are external to the dreamer's waking branch, but that are internal to the universal wave function that contains all branches. The dream is a window onto the multiverse, a window that opens when the waking brain's decoherence filter is weakened by the neurochemical changes of REM sleep. The dreamer is not imagining other realities. The dreamer is perceiving them dimly, fragmentarily, and through the distorting lens of the dreaming brain's associative processing, but perceiving them nonetheless. The physicist Max Tegmark has argued that the many worlds interpretation implies that every possible reality exists, every possible configuration of particles, every possible sequence of events, every possible version of your life. If the information leakage thesis is correct, then dreams are the evidence for this vast multiplicity, the nightly evidence that the dreamer receives through the quantum channel that the REM state opens, of the infinite variety of realities that the universal wave function contains. The physicist Sean Carroll has described the many worlds interpretation's implications with a directness that bears on the information leakage thesis. If many worlds is correct, then right now, in other branches of the wave function, there are versions of you making different choices, living different lives, and experiencing different realities. The branches are real, the versions are real, and the only thing that prevents you from perceiving them is the decoherence that separates the branches. The dream, in the information leakage framework, is the periodic weakening of that separation, the nightly opening of the quantum window through which the other versions, the other lives, and the other realities briefly become perceptible. The philosopher of mind Daniel Dennett has objected that the many worlds interpretation, even if correct, does not imply that the branches can be perceived by macroscopic systems like brains. Dennett argues that the decoherence is too complete, the interference too small, and the quantum effects too fragile to produce any macroscopically detectable inter-branch communication. The objection is serious, but it assumes that the decoherence is equally strong in all brain states, an assumption that the neurochemistry of REM directly challenges. The REM state's suppression of the decoherence-inducing neurotransmitters creates a specific, measurable, neurochemically defined window during which the decoherence may be sufficiently reduced to allow quantum information from other branches to influence the brain's processing. The objection stands for the waking brain. It may not stand for the dreaming brain. The contemplative traditions have described the multiplicity of realities in their own frameworks. In Hinduism, the concept of Maya, the cosmic illusion, describes the waking world as one configuration of consciousness among infinitely many possible configurations. The waking world is not the only real world. It is one real world, one projection of the divine consciousness among infinitely many projections. And the dream world is another real world, another projection, perceived through the different mode of awareness that the dream state provides. The Yoga Vasishtha states explicitly, the waking state and the dream state are of the same nature. There is no essential difference between them. Both are experiences of consciousness. And consciousness, in its infinite creative power, produces both with equal reality. The distinction between waking and dreaming is not a distinction between real and unreal. It is a distinction between two equally real modes of the same consciousness, two equally valid windows onto the infinite reality that consciousness produces. The Mandukya Upanishad's four-state analysis supports this directly. The waking state perceives the gross world. The dream state perceives the subtle world. The deep sleep state rests in the causal ground. And Turiya, the fourth state, perceives all three simultaneously, recognizing them as expressions of the single consciousness that produces them all. Turiya is the state in which the multiverse is perceived as a unity in which the many branches of the wave function are perceived, not as separate realities, but as different vibrational modes of a single, unified, conscious field. The sage Ramana Maharshi described the relationship between waking, dreaming, and Turiya with an image that directly supports the information leakage thesis. The world that you see in the waking state and the world that you see in the dream state are both creations of consciousness. The waking world is created by consciousness operating through the senses. The dream world is created by consciousness operating without the senses, and the self, the consciousness that is aware of both worlds, is not created by either. It is the creator of both. The self is the consciousness that perceives both branches, the consciousness that is wider than any single branch and that perceives, during the dream, the multiplicity of branches that the waking state's sensory filtering conceals. In Buddhism, the concept of the three realms, the desire realm, the form realm, and the formless realm, describes a multiplicity of realities that consciousness can inhabit. The dream state is a mode of perception that crosses the boundaries between the realms, perceiving elements from the desire realm, the emotional content, from the form realm, the visual imagery, and from the formless realm, the moments of contentless awareness that occasionally punctuate the dream narrative. The dream yogi who has mastered lucid dreaming can navigate these realms deliberately, using the dream state's reduced filtering to explore the multi-dimensional structure of consciousness and reality. The Zen master Zhuangzi's famous parable captures the information leakage thesis with poetic precision. Once, Zhuangzi dreamed he was a butterfly fluttering happily. He did not know he was Zhuangzi. When he awoke, he did not know whether he was Zhuangzi who had dreamed he was a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming he was Zhuangzi. The parable's power lies in its refusal to privilege the waking state over the dream state. The waking reality and the dream reality are both genuine experiences of consciousness, and the question of which is the real reality, the question that common sense answers by privileging the waking state, is, in the many worlds framework, a question that has no unique answer. Both realities are real, both are branches of the wave function, and the consciousness that experiences both is not confined to either one. Zhuangzi's parable has been analysed by the philosopher Robert Allinson as a demonstration of what Allinson calls ontological equality, the proposition that the dream reality and the waking reality have equal ontological status. Neither is more real than the other. Neither is the true reality of which the other is a pale reflection. Both are genuine experiences of consciousness, and the consciousness that experiences both is larger than either, capable of inhabiting both realities, capable of perceiving both branches, and capable of recognizing, from the vantage point of the larger consciousness, that the distinction between waking and dreaming is a distinction within consciousness, not a distinction between consciousness and something else. The Taoist concept of the great dream, The idea that the ordinary waking life is itself a dream, from which the sage eventually awakens, extends the information leakage thesis to its logical conclusion. If the dream state perceives other branches of the wave function, and if the waking state perceives one specific branch, then the distinction between dreaming and waking is a distinction between multi-branch perception and single-branch perception. The waking state is not awake in any absolute sense. It is focused, narrowed to a single branch by the decoherence that the waking brain's neurochemistry produces. And the awakening that the Taoist tradition describes is the permanent widening of perception to include all branches, the state in which the consciousness perceives the entire wave function, without the branch-selecting filter that the waking brain imposes. In Christianity, the tradition of visionary experience, the perception of realities that transcend the ordinary waking world, is closely associated with the dream state, and with states of consciousness that share the dream state's phenomenological features. The Apostle Paul describes being caught up to the third heaven, 2 Corinthians 12-2, an experience that he cannot determine whether it occurred in the body or out of the body, a description that captures the characteristic ambiguity of the dream state, in which the distinction between bodily experience and non-bodily experience dissolves. The Book of Revelation's visionary experience occurs when John is in the spirit, a state of consciousness that shares the dream state's features: vivid visual imagery, intense emotional content, bizarre juxtapositions, and the perception of realities that transcend the ordinary waking world. Now, let us connect the information leakage thesis to every investigation in this series. In our investigation of time, we establish that the block universe contains all moments simultaneously. Dreams access the block's temporal information through the reduced decoherence of the REM state, perceiving past and future moments that the waking brain's filtering normally excludes. The precognitive dream is the perception of a future moment in the block. The past life dream is the perception of a past moment. And the bizarre temporal distortions of dreams, the compression, the expansion, the reversal of time, are the perception of the block's non-sequential temporal structure, perceived without the sequential filtering that the waking consciousness imposes. In our investigation of distance, we establish that space is emergent from entanglement. Dreams may access the entanglement directly, perceiving the correlations that produce space without the spatial filtering that the waking consciousness imposes. The dream's ability to transport the dreamer instantaneously from one location to another, to combine distant locations into a single scene, and to perceive events at remote locations is the perception of the entanglement structure, without the spatial separation that the entanglement normally produces. In our investigation of the cosmic neural network, we establish that the universe may be a mind. Dreams are the individual node's perception of the network, the moment when the individual consciousness, freed from the waking brain's local filtering, perceives the non-local connections that link it to the cosmic neural network. The dream characters may not all be internal projections. Some may be the perception of other nodes in the network, other conscious beings whose quantum states are entangled with the dreamers, and whose information leaks through the reduced decoherence of the dream state. In our investigation of déjà vu, we establish that consciousness spontaneously accesses temporal information beyond the present moment. Deja Re, the recognition that the current waking moment matches a specific dream, is the strongest evidence for the information leakage thesis. The dream accessed the future. The waking moment confirmed the access. And the déjà vu is the moment of recognition, the moment when the leaked information from the dream is verified by the waking experience. The phenomenon of déjà re, the recognition that the current waking moment matches a specific dream, has been documented by the psychologist Anne Cleary, whose Gestalt familiarity research we examined in our investigation of déjà vu. Cleary has shown that déjà re is reported by a significant minority of déjà vu experiencers approximately 20 to 30%, and that the reports include specific, detailed, verifiable matches between the dream content and the subsequent waking experience. The Deja Re is the information leakage confirmed the moment when the leaked information from the dream is matched in waking experience by the event that the leak anticipated. In our investigation of reincarnation, we established that consciousness may manifest at multiple space-time coordinates. The dream state's access to past life information is the information leakage thesis applied to the karmic pattern, the quantum correlations that connect one incarnation to another, leaking through the reduced decoherence of the dreaming brain, producing the past life dreams, and the Deja Re experiences that the Stevenson-Tucker cases document. In our investigation of the hidden layer, we established that the visible world is a projection from a deeper, informational, possibly conscious substrate. Dreams are the perception of the hidden layer from within the consciousness perceiving the informational substrate directly, without the holographic projection that the waking brain imposes. The dream's bizarre, multi-layered, non-physical quality is the quality of the hidden layer perceived without the three-dimensional spatial filtering, without the sequential temporal filtering, and without the causal filtering that the waking brain's decoherence produces. In our investigation of vibration, we established that the universe is made of vibrations in quantum fields. Dreams are the perception of the vibrations without the standing wave filtering that produces the stable structures of the waking world. The dream's fluid, unstable, constantly transforming quality is the quality of the raw vibrations, the vibrations perceived before they have been frozen into the stable structures that the waking consciousness perceives as solid objects, fixed locations, and permanent entities. In our investigation of the quantum Zeno effect, we established that continuous observation stabilizes quantum states. The waking consciousness's continuous observation of the physical world stabilizes the decoherent, classical reality that the waking state perceives. The dreaming consciousness's relaxed, intermittent, non-focused observation destabilizes the classical reality, allowing the quantum superpositions to persist, the decoherence to decrease, and the information from other branches to leak through the weakened barrier. The dream's instability, its constant transformation, its refusal to stay fixed, its fluid, protean, ever-changing quality is the quality of a reality that is not being xeno-stabilized by focused observation. In our investigation of the principle of least action, we established that the universe follows the optimal path. Dreams may be the consciousness's exploration of the non-optimal paths, the paths not taken, the branches not actualized, the possibilities not realized in the waking branch. The dream allows the consciousness to experience the alternatives, to sample the branches that the principle of least action did not select for the waking reality. The information from these alternatives may be valuable, providing the dreamer with insights, warnings, and creative possibilities that the single, optimal, least action path of the waking branch does not contain. In our investigation of the inseparable quark, we established that isolation is forbidden at every scale. The information leakage thesis extends this prohibition to the branches of the wave function. The branches are not truly isolated. The decoherence separates them, but the separation is not absolute. Information leaks between the branches faintly, intermittently, and through the specific quantum channels that the dreaming brain's reduced decoherence opens. The prohibition against isolation operates across the multiverse, connecting every branch to every other branch through the quantum correlations that the universal wave function preserves. In our investigation of evolution, we established that evolution may be a quantum algorithm computing toward consciousness. The information leakage during dreams may be the quantum algorithm's mechanism for exploring the fitness landscape of possible realities, sampling multiple branches simultaneously, evaluating the fitness of different configurations, and selecting, through the karmic resonance, the branches that contribute most to the consciousness' development. The dream is evolution, operating at the level of individual consciousness. The quantum algorithm, exploring multiple possible lives and selecting the elements that the consciousness needs for its next stage of development. The picture that emerges from this synthesis is the most intimate and the most consequential that this series has produced. Every night, for 2 hours, your brain reduces its decoherence filters. The neurochemical changes of REM sleep suppress the neurotransmitters that maintain the waking brain's classical, decoherent, single-branch processing. The quantum coherence of the microtubules increases. The bandwidth of the quantum receiver widens, and the information begins to leak from other branches of the wave function, from other moments in the block universe, from other nodes in the cosmic neural network, from the hidden layer that the waking brain's filtering normally conceals. The information arrives as a dream. The dream is not a hallucination. It is a perception of a deeper, wider, more multidimensional reality than the waking state can access. The perception is distorted by the dreaming brain's associative processing, by the absence of the prefrontal reality testing, and by the emotional amplification of the hyperactive amygdala. But the distortion does not eliminate the signal. It colors it, shapes it, and translates it into the symbolic, emotionally charged, narratively structured experience that the dreamer perceives. The dream is a translated signal, a message from the multiverse, filtered through the dreaming brain's associative processing and delivered to the consciousness in the language of images, emotions, and stories. So what does this mean for you? It means that the 2 hours you spend dreaming every night are not wasted time. They are not the brain's downtime, not the consciousness's screensaver, not the meaningless byproduct of neural maintenance. They are the 2 hours during which your consciousness has the widest access to the deepest information that reality contains. The dreaming hours are the hours of maximum bandwidth, the hours when the quantum receiver is at its most sensitive, when the decoherence filter is at its most open, and when the information from the hidden layers of reality flows most freely into the conscious experience. It means that the strange, disturbing, emotionally overwhelming dreams that you experience are not signs of psychological disturbance. They are signs of quantum sensitivity, the dreaming brain's reception of information from the deeper, wider, more multidimensional reality that the waking mind conceals. The nightmare that terrifies you may be the perception of a threatening configuration in another branch. The blissful dream that fills you with inexplicable joy may be the perception of a harmonious configuration in another branch. And the recurring dream that returns night after night with the same setting, the same characters, and the same unresolved plot may be the perception of a quantum correlation that has not yet been resolved. An entanglement between your consciousness and a specific configuration in the multiverse that the dream is attempting to bring to your awareness. It means that the dreams you dismiss as nonsense may contain information that your waking mind cannot access through any other channel. The anomalous elements, the details that do not match your waking experience, the people you have never met, the places you have never visited, the events that have not yet occurred, may not be errors in the dream's narrative. They may be signals, fragments of information from other branches, other moments, and other dimensions of the multidimensional reality that the waking mind's filtering conceals. It means that the contemplative practice of dream awareness, the training of attention to remember, record, and reflect on dreams, is not a mystical indulgence. It is a technology for expanding the consciousness's access to the information that the dreaming brain receives. The dream journal is a data collection instrument. The lucid dreaming practice is a research methodology, and the dream yoga of the Tibetan tradition is a systematic technology for exploring the multidimensional reality that the dream state reveals, a technology that the physics of decoherence, the many worlds interpretation, and the Orchor model now provide a framework for understanding. And it means that the boundary between the real and the unreal is not where you think it is. the waking state is real. The dream state is real. And the reality that both perceive the multidimensional, multibranchal, temporally extended, holographically encoded, vibrationally constituted reality that this series has been investigating from every possible angle is deeper, wider, and more real than either the waking state or the dream state can perceive alone. The waking state perceives reality through a narrow filter, seeing one branch, one moment, one location, one configuration of the quantum fields. The dream state perceives reality through a wider filter, seeing multiple branches, multiple moments, multiple configurations simultaneously, and experiencing the superposition as the bizarre, beautiful, terrifying, transcendent experience that everyone recognizes as a dream. And the fully awakened consciousness, the Turiya of the Hindu tradition, the Rigpa of the Buddhist tradition, the Nous of the Christian tradition, perceives reality without any filter at all, seeing the entire multidimensional structure in a single, undivided, all-encompassing awareness. The dream is the intermediate state, the consciousness, halfway between the narrow filter of waking and the open awareness of enlightenment. The dream is the taste of what the mystics perceive, the fragmentary, distorted, emotionally amplified preview of the complete perception that the contemplative practices are designed to produce. Every night for 2 hours the filter opens, the information leaks, and the consciousness receives, through the language of images and emotions and stories, a message from the deeper reality that the waking mind conceals. The message is not noise, it is not nonsense, it is not the meaningless chatter of a brain running maintenance routines. The message is real, the information is real, and the reality from which the information leaks is the reality that every investigation in this series has been describing. A multidimensional, quantum mechanical, consciously grounded, vibrationally constituted reality that is deeper than the waking world, wider than the single branch, and more real than the surface that the waking mind mistakes for the whole. Tonight, when you close your eyes and the REM state begins and the dreams unfold in their bizarre, beautiful, impossible way, remember this: you are not going insane. You are not losing your grip on reality. You are widening it. Every dream is a wider view. Every night is a deeper access. And every morning, when you wake and the dream dissolves and the decoherence filter reasserts itself and the waking world snaps back into its single branch, single moment, single location clarity, remember that the clarity is a narrowing. The waking world's sharp, clear, logically consistent reality is the product of a filter that excludes 95% of the information that the dreaming brain received. The dream showed you more. The dream showed you the multiverse, the hidden layer, the temporal depth, the cosmic connections, the emotional amplification, and the quantum information that the waking mind's decoherence conceals. The dream showed you reality without the filter, and reality without the filter is stranger than the waking mind can imagine, but not stranger than the dreaming mind can perceive. The filter will weaken again tonight, the information will leak again, and the consciousness, your consciousness, the consciousness that has been traveling through these investigations for hours, that has been exploring the hidden layers of reality from every possible angle, will once again widen its perception to include the deeper, wider, more multidimensional reality that the waking world conceals. Pay attention to your dreams. They are not noise, they are not nonsense. They are dispatches from the multiverse fragments of other realities, leaking through the quantum barrier and arriving in your consciousness in the only language that the sleeping brain can speak, the language of images, emotions, and stories. The dispatches are real, the information is real, and the realities from which the information comes are as real as the one you will wake into tomorrow morning. Listen to the leakage. It has something to tell you.